Hi everyone, we're going to talk to you about the Pathfinder playtest that we got to play at Gen Con this year.
So this is one of the things that we were really excited about. We played in the Starfinder playtest, or I guess it wasn't the playtest last year. We played in Starfinder last year, and so this year, we waited for our last day because it was, a 5-hour session. And we were able to play in the playtest. And we'd gotten to talk to a couple of friends that had done it before then, the Order of the Amber Die folks and a couple of others. But I think, first off, for me, I give it thumbs up. I say I'm totally up for playing 2.0, or whatever it's called, Pathfinder 2. When it comes out, I overall enjoyed it. There's a few things I think that can still be improved, but that's why they're in playtesting.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. The main difference that I saw was the combat was so much more streamlined and moved quickly. It didn't take forever to get through one round of combat. It was kind of like a good amount of time where you could kind of be thinking about what you wanted to do next, but not to the point where you got bored by the time it got back to you.
And it just felt less crunchy. It was less about numbers and math and what are my bonuses, what are my pluses, what are my minuses, blah, 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 blah. It was just, okay, pick 3 things and then do it.
Yeah. So of the 3 actions you take, there was move, which was moving your speed, or up to your speed. You could search, which is searching the 4 tiles around you for traps. You could attack. Spells, depending on what the components of the spells, those would be 1, 2, 3 actions. I think there also were some that were essentially bonus actions, but I didn't have any that I played. You could also manipulate an object, and that includes like pulling out a weapon, taking a health potion, and
getting something out of your bag, reloading.
Yeah, stuff like that. And you can also like leap, which I think was half your movement. You could leap.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, as well as of course attack. You can attack, whether that was a ranged or a melee attack. That was one of your actions. You can do multi-attacks. Each time you attack again, it adds a +5 to the difficulty.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure is how that worked. And
or it was a -5 to your roll. Either way.
It made it harder by 5. And that was whether or not you attacked 3 times in a row. If you attacked and then moved and attacked someone else, that still made it at that 5 penalty. A lot of those things. I think that in the effort to streamline and move things along and basically just have this rule of you get 3 actions, pick them. Some of them, to me, feel a little unbalanced. It takes 1 full action for me to, bury my axe halfway through an orc, or it takes me 1 action to pull out a knife. Yeah. And that feels a little unbalanced. The other one that felt unbalanced to me is you can't split your movement. And I really didn't like that. It felt handicapping. The situation,
especially the situation you were in. I understand the move, attack, then move.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But if my movement was 30 feet, the situation I was in, I was moving 30 feet, and I didn't have a torch. One of my party members was 10 feet away in the straight line I was moving in, and so I wanted to move, grab the torch that he was handing me, and then close with the bad guy and attack him. But I couldn't do that. It was, I moved 10 feet to my friend, got the torch from him, moved 10 feet to the monster, and that was my 3 actions. And so by the time I closed, I was like, okay, I want to attack, and the GM running said, no, you've already done your 3 things. Move, item, move. And that that felt just really cheap to me. I felt cheated as this fun, epic adventurer. Instead, it was like, no, you can walk 20 feet and pick up a torch, and that's it. You can't stab them anymore.
Yeah, and I think also health potions required 2 actions because you had to take it out and then you had to take it. And that felt maybe a little bit too much to me of like, well, taking it out and taking it, to me, seems like it should be an action. Now, handing it to somebody else, and then they have to use their action to take it, that makes sense.
Sure.
And that's all stuff that gets worked out in the playtest.
And I also think it depends on, well, what is the game trying to focus on? Another popular tabletop RPG in their latest edition, the way they dealt with it is they wanted to focus on sort of the storytelling epicness, and so drawing your sword is a free action and stuff like that, or running and you grab something that doesn't cost anything extra. Pathfinder's looking at focusing on something else or balancing in a different way. Different isn't bad. And so that's fine. It's just not something that I loved. And it's really the only one major problem that I had the entire 5 hours. So that's not too bad.
Yeah. One thing I liked was attacks of opportunity are gone. You have to have them. I think like fighters get them as a class feat.
Yeah.
And some monsters do have them. But that meant that the combat, you didn't get into a melee combat and just stand there and whack at each other. There was a lot more movement. There was a lot more strategy, because it was, oh yeah, I can move back away and let somebody else move in.
It also meant that there was an element of surprise, I think, because you don't know if the bad guy, you don't know if the monster or the brigand or the whatever you're fighting has that. It probably doesn't. But when you go to move away and then all of a sudden you're caught by surprise because it's attacking you, that's, I think, a cool moment. I know that some of the other people we were playing with felt that they would like to see the attack of opportunity be a feat you can pick up later, or maybe like fighters start with it, but rogues get it at level 5 or something like that.
Yeah, to have that little bit more flexibility. Because I know one thing, chatting with folks about the 2.0, we haven't gone through the entire rule books, but they were saying that a lot of the customization has gone away, of having so many character options. That it's kind of more built into these archetypes. But that's also something I could see down the road adding more.
Yeah, I think as 2.0 grows, we'll get more and more feats. I mean, the SRD right now, there's something like, there's hundreds of feats to choose from. It's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, I know for me, it gets a little overwhelming when I have that many options. So, especially for new players, I think it's nice having to like, well, here are your options, and it's a reasonable amount to look at and decide between, and it's not something that you look at and go, this is too much. And
how am I supposed to know? Or the feats that get so granular that it's like, well, I really hope this situation arises. Speaking of new players, we had 2 or 3.
3.
We had 3 people at our table who had never played any RPG before, ever. And they were keeping up. They weren't asking any more questions than what we were. And the one other person, we had 6 people at our table. 3 of us had played RPGs and played Pathfinder in the past. 3 of them never had. And the newbies had just as few questions as what we did, learning the new system. And I think that really speaks to the accessibility of 2.0 to new people and new to Pathfinder people.
Yeah. So one of the other things that they introduced or changed, and I know it's something that a lot of people have mentioned, they just kind of have homebrewed that rule, but there are certain roles that the GM makes for the players. Like searching for traps, the GM rolls it and then lets you know, oh, you don't find any traps, or yes, there's a trap here. Which I think is really great, because that encourages the roleplay aspect, and it takes away the chance to metagame, or for the player to realize, oh, I rolled really poorly, there might be a trap here, and maybe even unintentionally change what you would do, versus, oh yeah, this is fine, and your character has no idea that there's a trap there.
Sure, I don't care who you are. I don't think that anybody can help it.
Oh,
you know, I mean, if Mike Merles rolls a 4 on his search for traps and doesn't find one, then he's still going to be like, yeah, but is it really not there? And so I do think that is cool. Now, there's a little bit more work for the GM. And I think in our 6-person game, the GM was still doing a lot of heavy lifting. And so for me, that says that maybe in a smaller game or a home campaign where you're only playing with maybe 4 people, I guess you run 6 of us, right?
Yeah, sometimes 6.
5 or 6 of us. It feels to me like the potential that things are a little more dependent on the GM with 2.0. But again, we've only played it the one time. If you've been playtesting, does that? I'd love to hear it. Does that bear out? Does it rely more? Does the GM have more to do in 2.0? What did you think about the casting and the spell casting and all that?
Yeah, I played a cleric. I figured that was a good way of testing out because I have played clerics before in Pathfinder, so it was a class that I was familiar with. And I really liked the way that spellcasting, depending on what components the spell has, it requires different amounts of action. So if it's just a verbal, it's just 1 action. If it's verbal and somatic, it's 2 actions. All the way up to, I think, 3.
When you could essentially overcast, kind of like in Shadowrun, right?
Yeah, there were some things that I could cast either at a level 2 or a level 3, or a level 1 or a level 2, and the higher level gave me either like an additional die to roll, or I added additional points, or it changed it from a single point of focus to a radius, and I liked that because it gave. You could have these same, like the healing spells, where it's like, oh, well, if I just cast this at a higher level, it goes from being 1 point to everything in this 30 radius. And I think for that, it actually gave a little less healing overall.
Yeah.
But it was, you got to heal like whoever.
More people. Yeah.
I
think that's cool. It's you spend a little bit longer, you work a little bit harder, you add in a material component, and so now you've taken all 3 of your actions, but you've gotten to heal all of us.
Yeah.
I think that's a cool, again, that's flavor for me.
Yeah, and some of the spells also had cost a spell point to cast. So that was, I can't remember exactly which ones those were, but a lot of them were like, oh, that's not my specific domain spell, so it's going to cost a little bit more, or it's a higher level, so I can only cast so many of these. I think that's a good way of limiting how often you can cast some of those higher level spells, so you have to be a little bit more strategic with them. But
it did do that I think is an improvement over some of how I felt about Pathfinder has been, is that there are times, especially at low level, where to me, it feels like if you're a magic user and you have a long day, all of a sudden you just don't know magic anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas this always felt like you were always a cleric, you were always a magical being. You just were less good at it if you were really tired. One of the things that I really liked is that the session that we played in was broken down into like 4 different modules. And so we got to play in the different modes, and that's something new that Pathfinder does. So you have downtime mode, which is where you can craft and you can level up and you can do all of that different stuff. We focused mainly on exploration and encounter. And in exploration mode, it doesn't really matter what your marching order is. We didn't have the map out or anything like that. And it was just sort of as we were going, a little bit more of the theater of the mind, and getting an idea of the type of stuff that we were doing. When we would switch into encounter mode, which is where initiatives come into order, the marching order, as well as our initiative going off of what we were doing. So since I was the rogue, I played a rogue, I was often doing the sneak and combining that with my movement, which was essentially searching for traps. So I would roll off of my dexterity, whereas some of the other players would roll off of different things because they were doing different stuff while we were exploring.
Yeah, so oftentimes I was looking around trying to pay attention to things, so I would roll my initiative off of my perception of how quickly did I see the threat.
Yeah, and the transition from exploration to encounter really was pretty seamless. It certainly felt more like it felt like a Final Fantasy game where we were on the world map, and then we would kind of do the whoop whoop whoop, and then we would zoom into the fight that was happening, and then we would go back out to our moving around and all that kind of stuff.
One thing we encountered, poor Ryan, his character died. But when you're knocked unconscious, your initiative moves to after the creature that knocked you unconscious, which they did so that, especially if your initiative, you were right after that creature, your party had no chance to try and revive you before you got that first roll to see if you succeed or fail a death saving throw.
So it moves you in the initiative order, but overall it's good for you.
Yeah, it was a little confusing, I think at times, just to remember, like, I had gotten used, you had gotten used to going after a certain person, and now you're going after this other person. But that's easy to...
An initiative tracker. That you use an initiative tracker. Our GM skipped a couple of folks just because it's a little confusing, but he was running so many different games. We had a big table and there were no initiative trackers. It's an easy fix.
And it was Sunday of Gen Con.
It was Sunday of Gen Con. The thing that it ultimately was bad for me, but I really like, is that once you get that death condition, even when you're brought back up, you still have it. So unlike in other games where it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm dying, but then I save, or someone cast a heal spell, and now I can get knocked down again and be perfect like normal. I got 2 death conditions, and then I got knocked down again, failed my third one, and my character's dead.
Yeah.
It makes it a little easier to die, and I think that that's okay. Yeah.
And there are ways to remove that dying condition.
Yeah.
I had a spell that, looking back, I was like, oh, I should have used a different spell at this time, but learning. That would have helped remove one of your dying conditions.
Oh, okay.
But I kind of looked at it after.
You were tired of me playing, and you wanted me to leave the table, so she didn't cast it. It's fine. My favorite thing is there's no more confirming crits.
Yes.
Yeah, they changed that, because I think you had it happen for you, but so crits are different now.
Yeah, so crits, a nat 20, but also if you roll 10, if you get 10 over the AC, is it AC or?
Whatever. If you get 10 over what you needed.
Yeah, then it's a critical hit. Which I think is really cool because that increases, especially probably when you get to some higher levels, the chance of getting those criticals, that it's not just the die roll.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes you feel a little bit more heroic. If you're a level 5 or 6 and you're going up, you wander into some, goblins or kobolds, and it's a little bit easier, and you're critting. It feels good to crit. It feels good to roll more dice and to do more damage. And so that's kind of neat. Yeah, I like that. So overall, I think that there's maybe a little bit more work to be done on Paizo's end as far as, well, what constitutes the use of one of your 3 actions. And again, maybe they don't change any of that because, well, if you start making exceptions to every rule, then we're back in the situation where we're constantly keeping track of all of these, if this, then that. But I feel cheated when it's like, well, normally I'd be able to move 60 feet, but I moved 30 feet and someone handed me something, so now I'm completely useless. That doesn't feel great. But it does feel great to be able to crit on squishy stuff better.
Yeah.
What are you overall?
I really like it. I like the 3 modes. I'm interested in looking at a little bit more of the downtime into like the crafting and all of that stuff. One thing they did say is that they changed that silver is now the standard cost. Right. So kind of a lot of things had gotten inflated over the years, so that kind of reset the economy of Pathfinder. But yeah, I like the 3 different modes, especially between exploration and encounter, that as you were saying, like with the Final Fantasy, it focuses down for the encounter, and then you kind of go back up for the exploration, and it's a little bit more of that theater of the mind.
Yeah, and it never feels forced or anything like that.
Yeah, and the flow between those two different modes was really smooth.
Yeah, I mean, we played 4 separate modules in 5 hours. That's crazy. I mean, that's a tough thing to be able to do. And we were breezing through them pretty quickly, but it still felt like we were accomplishing stuff and playing in a real game. So I think that really speaks to what Paizo was trying to doing by streamlining and quickening gameplay. And I think, A+ on that regard.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Have you played in the playtest? Have you picked up the book? Did you play at Gen Con? Let us know your thoughts. What do you think that 2.0 is doing really well? What do you think that they could pay a little bit more attention to and maybe tweak?
Thanks for watching. We make videos here every Tuesday and Thursday, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any of the videos. I want to give a special thanks to all of our patrons, especially Sean, Joan, Arvi, Lainey, and Bryce. If you're interested in helping us make new videos, go to conventions, kind of up our production quality, you can go over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out some of the cool perks.
Alrighty, so thanks again for Roll for Initiative. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Dawn.
And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
So of the 3 actions you could take, there were kind of a variety of different actions that could be those actions. You said
actions a lot.